young man, you can fight against a lot of things, and you can get sideways with people when you don't really intend to. There was a lot going on in my family, and my dad was handling it the best he could, and my mom was handling it the best she could, and I was handling it as good as I could, which wasn't good, and I didn't know how to handle anything, let alone myself. I was just trying not to be seen. I was trying not to cast a shadow. I was trying to be as small and inconspicuous as possible. Now, I understood some things. I understood a lot of the pain and a lot of the grief that let me rephrase that. I could see the pain and the grief that my family was going through, and looking back, I could feel it too, but I didn't register it. I was deflecting it, and I was trying to be like a duck and just let all that stuff roll off. But you can't be in that and not let it affect you. But and so when somebody would confront me or would show any interest in me, it was kind of shocking. Not that I didn't want to be seen so much, but just that I didn't want to add any kind of problem to what was going on, and I kind of felt like I just had a problem and that I was a problem. And so being young and dumb and going through changes, at some point I got sideways with my dad, and it was just over just stupid shit. And somehow my relationship with him turned, maybe I took the things that I was feeling and the pain and the fear, and maybe his presence, his confrontation gave what I was feeling a focal point. So somehow he became my problem, which is completely counter to what he was and what he had been previously. When I was little, all I wanted to do was be around him. I wanted his light to shine on me, and I wanted to be as close to him as I could be. And I remember I would get up. I'd get up as soon as I heard him making any kind of noise in the morning, and he got up early because he had a long commute to work, and so he'd get up and I'd hear him making coffee, and before he walked out the door, he would always sit in his chair with the one tiny lamp on, and he'd smoke a cigarette or two and go over bills or just sit there and ruminate. But I found that was my opportunity to have time with him, so I'd sit on his lap, and I could ask him any question I wanted to ask, and he would tell me what he knew. And as a 3, 4, 5-year-old, you know, I don't think they were hard questions, but, you know, I loved my dad, and he meant a lot to me, but at this age, you know, what, 13, 14, 12, I don't know, suddenly that's not who he was to me anymore, and it was just because of pain, and it was because of fear. And I know I made him crawl through brambles to try to get to me. You know, I put up a bunch of barbed wire around myself, and I could see him trying to reach out to me, but, you know, for why ever, is that a term, why ever? I don't know why. It's just dumb shit. And I imagine everybody, I imagine, you know, all of you have encountered that at some point in your life where you're just not thinking right and you're not feeling right, and you make it hard for people. And I made it hard for him to get close to me when I actually needed it so badly. I really needed somebody in my life to be close to me, and I could see him trying, and I was just a stupid fucking shithead, and I regret it so much. I really, really regret it. And but he did something that was so important, and I didn't recognize it. I didn't recognize it for so many years. I didn't recognize it until I was, you know, probably I don't know, probably 48 or 49. And you know, it breaks my heart. It as much as it makes me feel so proud, and it makes me see, you know, the love that a father has for his kids. And the love he had for me. And it was such a small thing, but man, it was fucking smart. He had a couple of really good buddies, and he knew he couldn't get to me. So he concocted a plan, and I didn't know what it was at first, but it fucking worked. And so the way it goes is, I got up one morning, and it was in April or May. It was the time of year where it rains here in the Midwest, and it's a particular type of rain that falls, and it's not really a rain. It's somewhere in between a mist and a rain. The droplets are so even, and there's no wind, and it's just a hush. And so I woke up that morning, and that was that kind of rain that just settles in, and it's going to rain like that all day. So I get up, and I'm fixing myself some breakfast, and nobody's at home. Dad's at work, and Mom's at the hospital with Joe, and So yeah, fixing my lunch, or my fixing my breakfast, and getting ready to go to school. And there's a note on the counter, and it's in my dad's handwriting, and it says, "Don't go to school today. Just stay at home. Charlie's going to pick you up." And that was pretty foreign for my dad to tell me to stay home from school, and it didn't make sense as to why Charlie would be picking me up. But Charlie was one of his old fishing buddies, so I just went and sat in the living room and just looked out the window, and maybe a half hour later I see Charlie's old Ford come in the driveway, and he's pulling his bass boat. And I don't think I'd ever been in Charlie's bass boat, and I can't really remember if I'd been fishing with my dad and Charlie before, but I knew they'd been fishing a lot. And so I go outside in the rain, and Charlie had gotten out of his truck, and he's coming around to meet me. And I said, "What's going on, Charlie?" And he said, "Well, I come to get you to take you fishing." And I said, "Why?" And he looked up in the rain, and like I didn't notice, and said, "Well, it's kind of day when fish are biting." And if you know this climate, you know that that's a hard truth. If it's that kind of rain, it's that kind of day to go fishing for crappie. And Charlie had already bought minnows and had his rig set up, and so I'm standing in the rain. He said, "You got a jacket or something?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Well, I've been wet a few times too." And he said, "Well, get in the truck." So got in the truck, and then we headed to Morse Reservoir, which was north of where we lived at, and we backed the boat down the ramp, and then he let me drive the truck and park it with the trailer, and then he nosed up and picked me up from shore, and then we went fishing. And so his bass boat had an old Evinrude, and he throttled that up, and we were shooting across the lake in his little janky bass boat. And then Charlie was an angler. He'd been retired for a long time, and he had to be in his 70s, I think, heading towards 80. But he was stout, had tattoos on his arms, and so everybody knew Charlie had his honey holes, as he called them. And they were full of fish, and he always slayed them. So anyway, so we shoot across the lake and ease up into one of his honey holes, and he's got it at an idle, and he sends me to the front of the boat and tells me to watch for snags. And so he cuts the engine, and we drift up under some branches and up near the bank, and he cuts the engine, and then drops the anchor, and then he'd do this thing where he'd let out this little whistle and say, "This is going to be a good one." So anyway, I don't think I'd ever been fishing for crappie before, but he showed me how to hook a crappie, or a minnow behind the tail, and pitch it in the water. And no sooner than our bobbers hit the water than we were slaying them, just like he said we'd do. And so we're just hauling them in, And he had his little thermos of coffee, and he poured some and passed it to me, bumped me on the shoulder, and didn't really say much. Just anytime we caught one, he'd holler out, "That's a good one." And before too long, we had 2 stringers full of fish. And, I was soaked and I was cold, but I could to this day I can still hear that rain hitting the water, and it just sounded. Those of you that have been out fishing in that weather, it sounds like somebody's whispering in your ear. It sounds really, really neat. And just sitting there in the quiet, listening to that rain, and just staring at the water and catching fish with someone who would end up being a really good buddy to me. And eventually he recognized that we had more than enough fish, and I think I was probably shivering by that time, so he kind of recognized it. So he mentioned we should leave some for somebody else. So we packed the gear under the gunnels, and then we shot back across the lake and loaded the boat, and then we headed back to Anderson. And in between Morris and Anderson is Old 8th Street Road, and it's real windy and twisty, and it's in the river bottom, and there's some hills, and it's just a beautiful drive. And I didn't really know what to say to Charlie, because frankly I didn't really know him, and just knew of him. So I just got my head out the window and just sinking into that rainy day feeling, and I heard him ask a question that I always heard. It was like the only time anybody acknowledged me, the only time I caught the gaze of somebody, or they always had a question, and the only thing they ever asked was, how's your brothers? Because my brothers were both very, very sick, and not good at all. So anytime anybody ever talked to me, it was to ask about my brothers. And it kind of, I didn't know why then, but it kind of grated on me. And it was what I recognized, why it grated on me years later, was not so much that how do I explain that? I guess it's a quality that we humans have, that it's a way of saying you care to somebody, you care about what's going on with them. But to articulate those words is difficult in a short span of time in passing. So it comes out as, how's your brothers? And in that, that's packaged with, somebody saying, I care about your family, or that's such a shame, or they're their way of pitying you instead of just talking about the thing. So my hackles would go up on my neck, and I would bristle anytime somebody asked me how my brothers were doing. And it's like, motherfuckers, you know how they're doing. Just say what you're wanting to say, or ask what you're wanting to fucking ask. It just made me feel like an animal in a cage, is what it did. And it made me feel like my family's on display. And it put me on display, and I did not want to be on display. And so I heard those words come out of Charlie's mouth, and I didn't even look at him. I gave my canned response, which was, they're okay. And I thought, well, there's the question answered, and we'll go on in silence, and I'll get out of this truck. And it totally just changed the mood. And well, then he said something that I had not heard up to that point. Not one time from anybody. And this had been going on since I was 10, 9 or 10. And Charlie said, he said, how are you doing? And looking back, that seems so strange, as to, never being asked that question before. How are you doing? And I wasn't doing good. And I didn't know what to say, and I almost cried. I felt it just welling up in me to actually feel the slightest hint at actual compassion and not pity, and not an interest in the latest news. How are you doing? And I for a while, I just couldn't say something. It seemed like an eternity, and it had to be, a noticeable space of time. And I couldn't think. I didn't know how to articulate how I was doing. But I kind of composed myself, and I looked over at Charlie, and I said, "I'm doing." And that was all I could say. And Charlie, in a simple man's, not saying Charlie was simple, but the way men speak to each other, as eloquently as men speak to each other, he said, sometimes doing is the hardest part. And that's a 80-year-old man connecting with a 14-year-old boy who's all just fucked up. And he could not have said a better thing to me to just crack, where I was at that time. And it was like that rain that was falling. And so we didn't really say anything else on the way home, but there was a connection there. So we get home, and so I thanked him for taking me fishing, and I hopped out of the truck, and he said, hold on a minute. And so he got out too, and he said, don't forget your fish. And he handed me a stringer of fish, and he asked if I liked river fishing, and I'd never been fishing on a river, and I told him so, and he said, won't be long, it'll be good to go river fishing, and I'll come pick you up, and we'll go river fishing. And I thanked him again, and watched him back out of the driveway and head down the road, and No, my mom was home by that point. I noticed the light on, and my guard went right back up. And I didn't want to have that guard up, but somehow I did. I don't know. Like I said, I think I focused. My parents became the focus of the hurt that I had and the anger that I had. I don't understand it. I guess it kind of makes sense, but so I knew immediately when I came in the kitchen, and she was excited, and I knew that it wasn't just a fishing trip with Charlie. It was my parents. They had set it up, and they were trying to reach me, but I didn't want them to reach me. And it disgusted me to feel that way towards my parents. I didn't want to feel that way. I knew what they were going through, but I felt that way. And it was so confusing, and it was, man, it was like just drinking poison. But that's what that shit does to people, and that's what it was doing to me and my parents. And but there's more of that story in my book. But I guess what I'm trying to say is in this is, a parent can try to help a kid in a situation like that, but it might work when that kid's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but by the time they get into their teens, those tools aren't working. And what worked for a kid when he was 5, 6, and 7, that's not working when he's a teenager, certainly a boy, and certainly not me. At least I don't think it works with other people. Maybe it does in a healthier situation. Maybe you can have those conversations with your kid and it works. But it didn't work with me and my parents at that age. And the thing that makes me, now, one of the many reasons why I can hold my dad in high esteem and talk about him and love him now is he recognized that he was never going to reach me, and I was at the point where I was going to be gone, and getting into stuff that generally doesn't end well. And but he had the insight to realize that it was going to take an uninvolved third party to reach me. It was going to take some other person that I had respect for. It was going to be somebody that wasn't coming in and teaching a lesson. It was just somebody that could move in and come alongside me and just share the things that a boy would like to do, that any young man would like to do. And it might seem simple to you guys, and it might just be dumb knowledge, but it meant a lot to me. I didn't know how much it meant to me then. It was fun. it was having permission to skip school and go kick around with some old guys fishing, and being treated like a peer, and not with pity, and not with lurid interest, or if that's the right word, not as a spectacle, but just genuine care and concern that, they cared for my father, they respected my father, and my father respected them, and they were more than willing to go in the breach and crawl through a young man's troubled mind and defenses, and just pluck him out of shit. And I'll never forget that. And I would say, if any of you are encountering that, when you've tried it all and it's not working, don't just give up. Find a funkle. Find a fucking uncle that you trust. Find a friend that you trust. And I don't know, I think it's just simple psychology. But I think it's maybe permitting a negative behavior in a kid in a guided, mature way. Bring in some elder strength, or some something to reach that kid. He reached for me through a couple of good old boys, and it worked. And things moved so fast, in that time, and through all that, it was a storm. And so I kind of accepted that time, and eventually, my dad started skipping school too. That's what he called it. He'd call in, not go to work, and it was generally when it was raining out, because that's when the fish were biting. And Charlie would pick us up, and we'd drink coffee, and pretty soon his other buddy Ray was coming, and Charlie had a fishing buddy, Hazel. She was an old-timey woman out of the mountains, and she'd come fishing, and it worked. It was the perfect recipe to keep me from the edge and have a wholesome experience and a wholesome time with good people. And I don't know if this makes any sense to any of you, but it's an opportunity that my dad had to, bless me with something that I didn't want. And I'm sorry, and I regret that it took me so long to recognize that exactly what he did, just in that simple gesture. But I've talked about it enough, but I didn't want that story to get away. and maybe it can help you. Something you're dealing with. I don't know. There's a good story.